Si comes tienes que lavar tu plato, Firulais. Anda, enjuágalo bien. No me gruñas. A ver, con la esponja eso. Y enjuaga bien que luego deja todo jabonoso. Eso así, muy bien, aunque de malas.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Across the pond, former champion Ebanie Bridges got the 59 over 56 points win over Ebanie Courtenay, who's now 2-2, to win a 6-round bantamweight contest. Bridges, back in the winner's column, making his debut in her corner was veteran trainer Dominic Engel, who for a very long time trained her beau, Kell Brock. Now he's training her. So what's next for the former champion, who now sports a professional record of 10 wins with 3 losses and no draws, 4 recorded knockouts, having never been knocked out in 13 professional bouts? Seen some rumblings about a Shannon Courtenay rematch, her old buddy Shanny. Shannon, who sports a professional record of 11 wins with 3 losses and no draws, 4 recorded knockouts, having never been knocked out in 14 professional bouts. Similar number of fights to Ebanie Bridges, except that Shannon is currently on a 3-fight winning streak, putting further distance between herself and her last career loss, where Ebanie this past weekend would have just now got herself back in the winner's column after 2 back-to-back losses. Ebanie, who is some years older than Shannon Courtenay, Ebanie is 39 years old, where Shannon is 32. Both former champions are now with MVP after having spent a good deal of time over at Matchroom. They have both jointly been picked up by most valuable promotions, so the fight is viable, in theory. What may serve as an obstacle is that Shannon Courtenay has since moved down in weight, down to super flyweight, in an effort to become a 2-weight world champion. And given that she's only 32 years old on a 3-fight winning streak, she's got time and an avenue to do it. She's not actually the one that needs a rematch.
No, that's Ebanie.
Because Shannon won the first fight. She's not the one in pursuit of revenge, going on a revenge tour. I don't know how receptive Shannon is or isn't to a second fight with Ebanie Bridges.
So that can be an obstacle.
There just isn't much incentive for Shannon Courtenay to move back up to 118 to give Ebanie a shot at redemption, a chance at revenge. The only avenue I can think of is if MVP can make it worth her while and pay her something substantial to do it. They are in bed with Sky Sports now, after all, and theoretically, you could do the rematch over there in the UK. That's where the first fight took place under very different circumstances approximately 5 years ago on Eddie Hearns' lawn. If you did it now, I doubt that the outcome would be different. Time really is on Shannon Courtenay's side. As stated, she's 32, Ebanie's 39. Can't really make the argument that Ebanie has improved as a fighter in recent years when only recently she was coming off of 2 back-to-back losses, and she had to fight a fighter with less than a handful of fights to get back in the winner's bracket. That is the inconvenient truth. At her very best, she's a pressure fighter. Pressure fighters don't often change much from one fight to the next, and even worse, that over time, it's a base style that's very hard to maintain. That intensity, that explosiveness. She probably still has her power, as that is the last thing to go, but she's lost a step in those legs and those reflexes. So the rematch 5 years later isn't all of a sudden now more winnable because more time has passed. If anything, it'll be harder to win the second fight, if there even is one. If there isn't, the odds of Ebanie becoming a world champion in today's landscape at 118 pounds are slim to nil. I don't think she beats Dina Thorsland. I don't think she beats Shernika Johnson. And this is a deep division. There are a lot of up-and-comers coming through.
A lot of threats.
No way to address the story without these facts of the matter, these inconvenient truths. While she may have gotten herself back in the winner's bracket yesterday, it's still an uphill battle for the former champion. Now it's time for another installment of what has fast become one of the most popular segments here on the channel, Ring IQ Hate Mail, where Shade 23753 reacted to my recent commentary, the nature versus nurture argument when it comes to pure boxers, safety first fighters, and why is it exactly they lean into that base style? Is it nature or is it nurture? To that, Shade said wrong. The reason that elite boxers are quote-unquote safety first is because they can be. Morons who just walk forward and throw punches, and even worse, will take one to give one, aren't good enough or skilled enough to have that option. You're welcome, and yet It's those same morons he's talking about that often cause pure boxers to unravel. Come forward pressure, guys. That's what he's talking about. How do you think Jarrett Hurd beat Arislan Lara? How do you think Shavkat Rakhimov beat Zelfa Barrett? How do you think Roman Villa was able to beat Rashidi Ellis? I can go on talking about safety-first fighters versus pressure guys. Pressure-style fighters, wasn't it by applying pressure to Tiara Brown was able to beat Sky Nicholson? I can go on. Wasn't it by applying pressure that Canelo was able to beat Jermel Charlo and William Skull, both of which fought safety-first fights? Isn't that how he was able to knock out Caleb Plant? What was Caleb doing? Because he wasn't taking chances. As a matter of fact, every fighter that beat Caleb Plant beat him by fighting like a moron, at least according to this guy. Whether it's Canelo Alvarez, or David Benavidez, or more recently Armando Resendiz, they all did the same thing. Come forward and apply pressure. So maybe it's not so moronic to push the pace and press the issue against the outboxer, since in most instances when those styles are matched against each other, pressure seems to work. Most, but not all. There are exceptions to the majority, but the majority of the time, pressure-style fighting is what beats the outboxer. Need more examples? Artur Beterbiev versus Marcus Brown. David Avanesyan versus Josh Kelly. To some degree, Oleksandr Usyk versus Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury's moving lateral, trying to stay behind a jab and a straight punches, and Usyk is putting educated pressure on him, barreling forward, throwing combinations. So what I think is that Shade 23753, he's got it backwards, where he thinks the safety-first fighters only fight that way because they have that option. I think it's because they ain't got no other option. I think it's because fighting in the pocket doesn't suit them. They don't have the power for it, they don't have the durability for it, they don't have the engine for it. That's why, more often than not, that's their kryptonite. The idea that getting on your toes and fighting like you got ants in your pants is going to be the trump card in all situations, or most of them, that's not the story that time tells. That's not how it usually goes. It's not how it went for William Skull recently when he was knocked out by Jacob Bank. And what's William Skull if not an outboxer? A safety-first fighter. What's Tony Harrison? Tony Harrison is a guy who's been knocked out on more than one occasion by the same kind of come-forward morons. Willie Nelson knocked him out, Jarrett Hurd knocked him out, Tim Tszyu knocked him out. What the fuck is Tony Harrison if not a pure boxer? It's a guy moves lateral, gets on his toes, uses the jab, stays behind it. He even has a bit of power. But what do you notice about Tony? Tony can't hold a shot to save his life. So is that why he's a safety-first fighter? Because he's no good on the inside and he can't hold a shot to save his life. You know what Shade is doing? Shade is thinking of those few pure boxers, those few outboxers that actually hold up under pressure, and he's applying that to everybody. You know who he's thinking about. He's thinking about Floyd. As always, because that's what these types always do. I guess because everybody's supposed to be Floyd. Anybody, everybody, fighting out of a Philly shell with a halfway decent jab can walk through the rain without getting wet. At least in this guy's opinion, except the actual sport of boxing says the opposite. These economic outboxers, safety-first boxers, more often than not, crumble under pressure. Pressure is their kryptonite. Now, maybe there's an argument that pressure fighters, more often than not, are limited to pressure fighting. They usually don't change, but the same can be said about the pure boxer. They're limited to outboxing. They usually don't change, and the ones that try to usually get knocked out. Usually, if you look across the boxing landscape throughout all these different weight classes and all these different fighters with all these different base styles, what usually happens when you match a pressure-style fighter with an outboxer, usually, outboxer gets mowed down. Usually. So what if they're both limited? The pressure fighter, the pure boxer, they're not that adaptable. And what separates the top-tier fighters, the elite fighters, from the ordinary ones is how adaptable they are. That doesn't apply to everybody. Everybody's not as versatile as an Usyk, an Inoue, a Terence Crawford. Everybody's not as adaptable. What do you notice about the elite of the elite? They usually toggle between two different base styles. Floyd Mayweather toggled between being a boxer-puncher in his younger years and being a pure boxer in his later years when he developed hand issues. Crawford, same deal. He toggles between two different base styles depending on the opponent. Inoue does the same thing. Usyk does the same thing. Bivol. The base styles themselves most represent a game of rock, paper, scissors. By themselves, there is always at least one base style out there that on average beats the other. On average. But for that fighter that is above average, not limited to just one base style and one way of fighting a fight, they can toggle between two when the situation calls for it. And that's what makes them elite. It's not singular. It's not because they're pure boxers. It's because they're adaptable. It's not because they're boxer punches. It's not because they're pressure fighters. It's because they're malleable. They can adjust. That's what Alicia Baumgartner did this past Friday. She starts off the fight like a boxer puncher, but finishes the fight as more of a pure boxer, moving and jabbing and working off the counter after her opponent is a little bit tired. And after the damage is set in, after the pace of the fight has slowed, which is more accommodating for a pure boxer. But it's not because she's a pure boxer, it's because she made an adjustment, and it's the adjustments that separate the good from the great, the good from the elite. So you're welcome. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, the rumor mill is spinning, and what it's saying is that inside sources have stated they're having trouble with ticket sales for Benavidez versus Ramirez. It's looking like the top deck of the venue will not be opening for the fight. They are making the adjustment on people's seating, as they see this fight will fall short of expectations. David Benavidez is again showing that he does not have the star power to move the masses. More detailed information to come out this coming week. And this report is brought to us by the inevitable D-Block, who, it's no secret, he is not a fan of David Benavidez. So should we trust him and his inside sources? Or should we take this rumor with a pinch of salt? And more often than not, I maintain a healthy level of skepticism as to anything and everything I read on the internet, if not for David Benavidez's constant mentions of Canelo Alvarez in the build-up of this upcoming fight. There's a reason that no matter whose podcast he's on, or who's conducting the interview, the line of questioning is always the same, as are the responses.
All right, man, this is from me. All right, man, this is from the war room, not from me. All right, so don't kick my ass. The question is, why he ducked the fight against Canelo at 168 while it was mandated by the WBC?
So there was no interest of Canelo fighting me, even though I was mandated. I think they made it extremely clear that Canelo said that I didn't fight nobody. I had no value to fight him. So like I said, I wasn't going to sit around and be at 168 if I wasn't going to get guaranteed a shot. They mandated me, but that, Canelo, as he showed, he does whatever he wants. Canelo was never interested in that fight.
What's most telling about that Q&A session with David is that in it he acknowledges the World Boxing Council was going to order the fight, but he chose to leave the division anyway. So he's not the victim that he's made out to be by his fans. He himself acknowledges that upon the World Boxing Council ratifying the mandate, he still chose to leave the weight class. Because Canelo isn't interested. Canelo, who you can't stop talking about. Canelo, who the interviewers can't stop asking you about. They go through this dog and pony show every David Benavidez fight. Canelo Alvarez becomes the centerpiece of a fight with David that David said isn't gonna happen. So if it isn't gonna happen, why aren't the interviewers asking him about Zurdo or Jai Opataya? Why does it seem like they don't really care about David unless his name is attached to Canelo's? They only mention other fights for David in passing. They don't focus on those fights like they focus on Canelo. Because in the entire buildup of next month's fight, all I hear them asking about, and all I hear David talking about, is Canelo. Which might lend some credence to the notion that this fight he's about to have with Zurdo, it's not selling, people are not that interested in it. All they're really interested in is Canelo, and they're only interested in David if it involves Canelo.
I was thinking, for the most part, the thing with Terrence Crawford that's different between you and Terrence, that Terrence just beat him up, but I believe you would stop him. I think that's the reason why he never took the fight. I mean, there's several weight classes he could have fought you in, and he ducked every time. And one time I was watching, and he said, it's because you was disrespectful. What did you do that was disrespectful? He said, this is the reason you're not getting the fight.
This guy been talking shit, but at the end of the day, bro, boxing, you get the respect after. I mean, if anything, that's what you want. That builds up a fight, right? He's the money man. He wants a lot of money for each pay-per-view fight. You know, he's getting a lot of money. He made 150 mil his last fight. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, you need a storyline. You need two fighters that don't like each other, that talk stuff to each other to make the fight even bigger. Just like how me and Morrell did. You know what I mean? It was a great fight. It was a great build-up, but we showed respect after.
Right.
But I mean, but that stuff just sounds really corny to me. How are you gonna say I'm not gonna fight you because you're being disrespectful?
I think at this point it doesn't even matter why specifically Canelo's not going to fight him so much as he's not going to fight him. So he can't be the centerpiece of promotion for every fight that you have thereafter, because what is it building towards? A fight that isn't going to happen.
Is that all you got to talk about?
And is that fight that isn't going to happen all anybody has to ask you about? Because what that communicates is that unless it's about that fight, they're not that interested in you.
Well, David knows that. That's why he keeps the focus on that fight. One minute he says that he would reject any overtures for a Canelo Alvarez fight. That was literally last week. So that this one,
He can get back to campaigning for the fight.
but where the fuck is it supposed to happen? Canelo Alvarez is capped out as a super middleweight, where now David is all the way up there at cruiser.
So where the fuck is it supposed to happen?
I made a joke a couple of months ago, before David officially announced his move to cruiserweight, that this guy's gonna be walking around 200 plus, still talking about the Canelo Alvarez fight, because the biggest part of selling David Benavidez and promoting him, it's not David himself or who he's fighting, it's Canelo.
David himself is not actually that popular. He's been on pay-per-view 4 times now, and not a single one of those pay-per-views turned in robust numbers.
Think I'm lying? Show me the David Benavidez pay-per-view that turned in 250 or 300,000 pay-per-view buys at least to prove that he's popular.
Because that's the baseline for a popular fighter. That's the baseline for a fighter who's on his way.
Not how many people are talking about you on the internet. Talking about you on the internet is free. Making YouTube videos about you is also free, as is watching those interviews. The real gauge for a fighter's popularity is how many people are willing to pay to see them fight. Now that potato-faced kid, Hobby, claims that David Benavidez has usurped Cinco de Mayo weekend from Canelo Alvarez.
Oh, is that what he did?
Because if he did, is he going to do 500,000 pay-per-view buys on that day? Like Canelo did with Jaime Munguia? Is he going to sell 600,000, in excess of 600,000 pay-per-views with an Edgar Berlanga, like Canelo did, if he really overtook him as the face of boxing? Is that what we should expect to happen next month?
Whose fight do you think is going to be bigger? David's next fight in May or Canelo's next fight in September? We all know the answer. The David Benavidez fans do too. That's why they keep bringing up Canelo, because without him, David just ain't popular.
Sad but true.
They gotta hang on to the name of Canelo Alvarez for dear life, because without that, it's very hard to sell cruiserweights, as Americans generally don't watch them.
The sad part is, that's not even a bad fight. I'm actually looking forward to Benavidez versus Zurdo, but the fact of the matter is...
You know, it's not even a bad-looking card. Jaime Munguia is going to be challenging Armando Resendiz for the WBA title on that show.
But nobody seems to care. Not when all they keep talking about is Canelo. All they keep asking about is Canelo.
So that when Inevitable D-Block says that per his sources, the tickets just aren't moving, you know what? That's not that hard to believe.
Even coming from him.
They don't really care about David unless it involves Canelo.